Hey guys, Fallen Messiah here and welcome to another Diablo 4 build guide. I've been hard at work at the very start of this season, just blasting non-stop to make sure to get this build online for you guys as soon as possible, and the end result is here. During the testing of the PTR, I tested 3 builds. One of them is the Archmage Necro, and back during the PTR, I already decided that this is going to be the first build I will play and test out and push into the Season 9. This is a super fun build that takes full advantage of new gloves called the Hand of Naz, which basically turns our mages into Archmages, granting them bonus damage and extra utility, and also it kind of subverts the usual minion builds by making us the tank for our minions while our minions actually do damage. The end result is a super fun, fast-paced build that plays really well, that can push well into the pit tiers 90+ as well. Now, something to keep in mind, which is also quite evident during the PTR, that this isn't an S tier build, but it's pretty close. I would say a strong A+. You can do pretty much anything in the game as long as you set it up properly, and as long as you follow my guide, you shouldn't have any problems. You will crush Torment 4, you will crush P tier 60s, 70s, and even A's without any issues. This is a decent speed farmer and an amazing boss killer, and overall just a very fun build to play that you're going to enjoy in every aspect of the game. So as always, sit back and relax as I take you through everything you need to know about this build. We'll go over skills, items, Paragon, and more. Sounds fun? Then let's get to it. But before we do, I have to say these videos take a long time to make, so as always, if you appreciate these efforts and the amount of time that I take into playing and blasting and making these builds and all things that go with that, hit that sub button and like the video because it helps me out tremendously. And also, of course, as with any of my previous guides, there will be a planner down below that you can always reference. And also, if you have any questions, I'm always available in the comments, so just shoot me a question and I will answer if I can. Okay, that's it. Let's get straight to it. Alright guys, now before I take you to the skill portion of the guide, just a couple of quick notes about this build in general. This is not one of those builds that you can kind of immediately start blasting with. There are a couple of moving pieces, a couple of items that you kind of have to get in order for this build to really get moving. This is especially true for the new item, the Hand of Naz, that enables the entire build. Without it, you should probably pivot into something else while leveling. I usually use Corpse Explosion and Bone Spear. These skills are really good while leveling from 1 to 60. After that, as soon as you get the gloves, you can then pivot into the kind of a weaker version of this build until you get everything fully online. Also, you will see two main variants of this build in the planner. One is with Mythics and the other is without. The one without uses a different ultimate, which is something that I'm going to explain in this portion of the video. So we're using Reap and Enhanced Reap. The great thing about this build is that we are actually using our basic skill, not really to generate essence, but because we are so up close and personal to the monsters, we're actually benefiting from this damage reduction. So the skill says that once we hit an enemy with Reap, we increase our damage reduction by 15% for 4 seconds, which is actually pretty cool. So we're going to be reaping all of the time, and we always have this damage reduction because we're up close and personal to all the mobs. And you're gonna see the game in the gameplay section a little bit later how this actually looks like. And also, additional modifier, if an enemy hit by Reap dies within 2 seconds, we also gain more attack speed, which is actually a direct multiplier for our minions. So just overall, a very useful thing to have. Then we're going to put 3 points into Hued Flesh. Hued Flesh is amazing. Our minions are going to be creating tons of corpses with this, so we want 3 points into here. We need corpses to consume them with our Raise That to gain various different benefits and multiplicative bonuses. And then we're going to put 1 point into Blight, Enhanced Blight, and Supernatural Blight. This is only a straight up damage multiplier, so our core skill is basically our support skill. Just like we are supporting ourselves with Reap, we're getting damage reduction. This is a damage multiplier. Every time we cast Blight, our minions deal 20% extra damage to all the enemies that are on the blighted ground. And also, this doesn't have to be cast all the time. You cast it once every couple of seconds, and then you cast it again. This is not something that you cast all the time. We're gonna put 3 points into Necrotic Fortitude. Now this is amazing because we're going to be having Barrier pretty much all the time. It's going to keep us alive in higher levels of the pit. Anything lucky hit related is really beneficial for this build because we have up to 12 mages up at any given time, and every time they hit, they have a chance to activate lucky hit bonuses. This is a ton of lucky hit procs, so anything lucky hit related is really beneficial for this build. We'll be having pretty much permanent barrier on because of this. 3 points into Titan's Fall, this is just a damage multiplier. 1 point into Spiked Armor, just for extra armor, more damage reduction. If you need more, you can put more and subtract something else. 1 point Bone Prison, Enhanced and Dreadful. Bone Prison is a pretty nice spell in this build. It just kind of makes the build a little bit better, because enemies inside are vulnerable, but also they take 15% increased damage, and also it reduces our cooldowns a little bit further, which kind of helps with the uptime of our Army of the Dead. So just overall, not a bad spell to have. It's not mandatory, you can switch it up with Blood Mist or something else if you feel like you need Immune or more Sustain, but generally speaking, this is something that's going to be in the planner. 1 point Grim Harvest, so we can go to 3 points Fueled by Death. We deal 20% extra damage for 6 seconds after consuming a corpse, and we will be consuming corpses all the time. 3 points into Death's Embrace, just another damage multiplier. 3 points into Precision Decay. We want as much lucky hit chance as possible because it's so good with this build, and the main reason why it's so good is because of this. Decrepify, 1 point here, 1 point Enhance, and 1 point Abhorrent. This is pretty much a staple in any Necromancer build. Every time our enemies get hit while afflicted with Decrepify, have up to 15% chance to reduce our active cooldowns. This is huge. This is going to keep our Army of the Dead up pretty much 100% of the time. And also, our minions are going to be applying Lucky Hit all the time. And just in general, the Decrepify, Curses, Lucky Hit, and minions, they all synergize incredibly well with this build. We're gonna put 3 points into Amplified Damage. Our pants are gonna make sure that our enemies are cursed all the time, so this is just another great source of damage multiplication. And this is the main source of our damage. This is the biggest damage multiplier of this entire build. I will talk a little bit more on how to increase this in the item section, but basically this is a huge multiplier for Skeletal Mages, which are the only ones actually doing damage in this build. So all points go here. 3 points into Callous Blood, just another great source of damage multiplication. 1 point Corpse Tendrils, Enhanced and Blighted. Corpse Tendrils are kind of a staple for most Necromancer builds, and this does a lot of good things for us. First of all, it's a mob pool, so it pulls all the monsters together, allows us to benefit from more AoE and just overall do more damage. It also activates an important aspect on our items, which we're gonna talk about more a little bit later. And finally, it's the only source of blood orbs we have available, which is another source of huge damage multiplication, which I will go over in the Paragon board. 3 points Necrotic Carapace. So whenever a corpse is formed from our skills or our minions, which is going to be happening all the time thanks to our Lucky Hit synergy, we will have Fortify. So basically this build really benefits from permanent Fortify and permanent Barrier, which allows us to actually be quite tanky. Now our mages do part shadow damage and part physical. So for the shadow portion, we're going with 3 points into Reaper's Pursuit. We have a darkness skill on our action bar, which is Blight, so we benefit from that bonus. 3 points into Gloom, and 3 points into Terror. We're going to put 3 points into Finality. This is another huge source of damage multiplication. 5 points into Army of the Dead, Prime, and Supreme. The damage portion of Army of the Dead is irrelevant. We have an aspect or an amulet that provides us with a ton of damage while Army of the Dead is active, which is the whole point of why we want to make sure that we have as close to a permanent uptime on Army of the Dead as possible. So 5 points to reduce cooldowns. And also, Supreme Army of the Dead is really useful in case you actually die. Dying in this build is really annoying, because if you die during the pit, you're left with 0 mages, which means that you're left with 0 sources of damage. But if you pop Army of the Dead, then the skill itself is going to raise your mages again. I'm gonna put 3 points into Hellbent Commander, just another huge source of damage multiplication. I put 2 points into Inspired Leader, just to get a little bit more critical strike chance. This is not mandatory, but I feel it rounds up the build really well. You can put more points or you can subtract them, depending on your needs, that's fine. And of course, we're going with the key passive Callan's Edict. This is just another huge source of damage multiplication for us. Now let's talk about ultimates. When it comes to ultimates, you have several options. You need to have a pretty good gear, which we'll talk about in the item section, to have a near permanent uptime of Army of the Dead. If you do, that's great. If you don't and you feel like more than 5, 10, even 15 seconds, like it's still not up again, then you're not actually doing a lot of extra damage, so you're better off with something like Soul Rift. You put Soul Rift on and it actually works really well. Bone Storm also works well because it also provides you with more damage reduction and also more crit strike chance and attack speed. So depending on your needs, until I optimized my gear, I actually went with Soul Rift, and that skill is actually going to be in the non-mythic unique version of this build. Alright guys, let's talk about items now. This is an endgame build. It uses 2 mythic uniques. They are not necessary for the build to properly work. You can definitely play Torment 4 without them, and I will have 2 variants in the planner, one with mythics and one without. With that being said, of course, both of them add tremendous value to the build, so if you can afford over time to make them or find them, the build is going to be really grateful for them. So first of all, Helm is going to be Mythic Unique Air of Perdition, just adds amazing value to this build. So crit strike chance, lucky hit, I already talked about lucky hit, why it's important. Movement speed is always nice, and core plus to core skills is irrelevant. Other than the great stats, it also adds straight up 60% multiplicative damage, no questions asked. So this is really powerful. I was unlucky here and I got the Greater Affix core skills, the only one that does absolutely nothing to us. But at the beginning of the season, you kind of have to take whatever you're given. But anyway, if you can afford this item or if you can find it, that's going to be the best in slot. And you should try to masterwork critical strike chance at least 2 times, preferably 3. But if your masterwork lands on lucky hit chance once, like this example, that's completely fine. And also ideally you want critical strike chance Greater Affix as well. For a non-mythic version, you could go with something like this, for example. So a helm with intelligence, life, and armor, and with the tempers for total armor and also corpse tendril size. This is also, of course, going to be in the planner in the non-mythic variant. And over here, we also have a nice aspect of hardened bones that gives us a ton of extra damage reduction. Of course, for the chest, we're going with the Shroud of False Death. This is the best item in the game, this is no surprise. My previous video actually talked about this very item. I went into great detail talking about why it's so good. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check it out. It's around 20 minutes of your time, but I go over this item and I dissect it to every minute detail to show you why it's actually so good. But anyway, of course, +1 to all passes is just amazing. Make sure to triple crit all stats if you can. This is the most important affix on this item. And once again, I was unlucky with this Greater Affix. This damage on X attack is completely worthless, but it is what it is. So this is the best in slot. Of course, if you can't get this item, a good alternative is a legendary armor that has Occult Dominion on it, and then on the boots we will go with something more mobility based. And you want to make sure that you have as much armor as you can on your chest if you don't already have Shroud of False Death, because this build kind of struggles with armor and it needs all it can get. Now for the gloves, this is the item that enables the entire build, the Hand of Naz. So this turns our mages into Archmages, grants them more damage, more AoE, and more utility. Whenever they're threatened, they actually teleport away, which means that we are the tank for our minions, and they actually are the ones that do damage. So this is kind of like what makes the build happen. As you can see, I didn't even masterwork this, fully for some reason. I guess I forgot. But even with this build, I already cleared 85-bit pretty comfortably. And I'm going to show you the gameplay a little bit later as well. This item has amazing stats for this build. So, max life, attack speed, which is amazing on this build. Skeletal Mage damage, which is okay. But the biggest thing here is Skeletal Mage Mastery. So I don't even have Greater Affix here yet. I was trying to get gloves that have both attack speed and Skeletal Mage Mastery Greater Affix and maxed out damage on the power. So just to show you that there is still room for improvement even on this build that I'm showing you. The most important stat here is of course Skeletal Mage Mastery. Every point here is 30% multiplicative extra damage. So nothing to scoff at. If you can, try to triple crit it with the masterworking. Attack speed is the second most important stat on these gloves, so if you're able to have Greater Affix here, that's going to be really beneficial for you as well. Pants are going to be Blood Moon Breeches. Blood Moon Breeches are also an amazing item, kind of almost mandatory. You really want to equip them as earlier as you can because they allow our summons to auto apply curses. And this does so much for us. First of all, when our summons apply the Crepify, they also apply the effect that reduces our cooldowns. Second of all, this power says that we deal up to 50% increased critical strike damage to enemies that are affected by our curses. And there's also additionally even more multipliers on our cursed opponents thanks to the amplified damage passive and thanks to our Paragon as well. So just overall huge damage multiplier and huge utility as well. Hellbent Commander is pretty much the only important stat on this item, even though critical strike damage is pretty nice as well. Now, for whatever reason, this Hellbent Commander passive is bugged on this item. Even though this is a live version, this is a bug. As you can see, I double crit the Hellbent Commander. I only got +4. It starts with +3. So that's not supposed to happen. This should be something like +7 or +8 right now. So we're losing more damage thanks to a bug. For the boots, we're going with Intelligence, Armor, and Move Speed. Move Speed is kind of important. We want to be moving around very quickly. We want to be able to pick up blood orbs for more damage. This is really good for the build, so if you can squeeze in more move speed, make sure you do. If you can't, then Intelligence, Armor, and Life is going to be the best one if you're struggling to keep yourself alive. We're trying to squeeze out as much armor as we possibly can, because all of these uniques and all of these mythics do not have armor stat on them whatsoever. They're super offensive, so we're going to be using boots to squeeze out a little bit more armor. And also, Masterworks, we're going with move speed and corpse tendril size. Corpse tendril size is important because they proc our grasping veins, which is another source of big damage multiplication. And here, for the aspect, we're going with the Occult Minion. This increases the number of our skeletal warriors and mages by 2. However, because we are sacrificing our warriors, we actually gain more like 4 mages from this item instead of just 2. For the weapon, we're going with Two-Headed Sight. Any two-handed weapon with 0.9 attacks per second is going to work, but Sight is the best because of the summon damage implicit. We're going with Intelligence, Max Life, and Quick Strike damage. For Tempers, this is a huge source of damage multiplication. Chance for Skeletal Mages to attack twice. Not only do they literally do double damage, they proc more lucky hit bonuses every time they attack, so this actually does 2 things for us. And that's what I was talking about. Like, if your gear is super optimized, then you should go with Army of the Dead if you have the uptime to keep it pretty much 100% of the time or 90% of the time. But if you don't, if you, like, for example, only have 20% chance for mages to attack twice instead of 70%, that's a huge difference. You won't be getting nearly as much the Crepify cooldown reduction than if you had, like, triple crit. So that's what I was talking about, you know, in terms of kind of making sure that our build is optimized if we're going to be running Army of the Dead on the build. Because these things really add up, and that's a huge difference, not just in terms of damage, but also in terms of cooldown reduction and utility. So it's really important to get this chance up as high as you can take it. And second temper is Skeletal Mage damage. Now, for the aspect, we're going with Service and Sacrifice. This is up to 200% extra multiplier for our Skeletal Mages. And it also kind of pretty much makes them immortal in combination with the Skeletal Mage passive already, so they are never going to die. Don't even worry about that. For the amulet, ideally, we would have Intelligence, Hellbent Commander, and Coalesced Blood. That would be the preferred amulet. But if you have only some of these things, that's completely fine. Good amulet is really hard to find. So you can definitely run something like this. As you can see, I even lack 1 rank to Hellbent Commander. I didn't get the enchant, so it's suboptimal, but it's fine. It still works. Tempers are ultimate cooldown reduction and Skeletal Mage damage. And also, this aspect is the entire reason why we're running Army of the Dead in the first place. While it's active, our mages take reduced damage, but more importantly, they deal up to 165% extra multiplicative damage. So that's the whole point of using Army of the Dead. If you can't keep the uptime of the Army of the Dead, then you're not benefiting from this, because our minions only take advantage of this aspect while the Army of the Dead is active. If it's not active, it does nothing. That's why in the non-mythic portion of the guide, I'm actually recommending a different aspect that's going to be active all of the time. And you only switch to Unyielding Commander if you can make sure that you have a near permanent uptime for Army of the Dead. If you don't have it, you use a different aspect and a different ultimate. If you do have a near permanent uptime, or preferably up to 5 seconds at most, then you will be switching to Unyielding Commander and you will be switching to Army of the Dead. That's it. And of course, another star of the show is the Ring of Mendel. This has been buffed tremendously comparing to the previous seasons. So now this damage that we have on the power benefits from all the bonuses that we have for our Skeletal Mages, and it ends up being tons of physical damage. That's the physical part of the damage that our minions are doing. Also stats here, pretty great. Intelligence great, summon attack speed also great, another source of damage multiplication as well. And we're gonna talk about why in the Paragon section. And of course, +5 to Skeletal Mage Mastery, a huge source of multiplication as well. Try to triple crit that with Master Booking if you can. And for the last slot, we're going with the Grasping Veins aspect. That's why we are rocking Corpse Tendril Size, and that's part of the reason why Corpse Tendrils are so good, because we gain a lot of crit strike chance for 6 seconds when we cast them, but more importantly, we deal up to 50% X critical strike damage bonus to all enemies that are damaged by Corpse Tendrils. So that means that if we increase the Corpse Tendril size, we increase the amount of monsters that are going to be damaged, and we ultimately end up doing more damage to them. For affixes, we're going with Intelligence, Crit Strike damage, and the third one is very important, chance to make enemies vulnerable on lucky hit. Try to make sure you have this on the ring, because if you're rocking Army of the Dead, this is going to be the only reliable source of making our enemies vulnerable. If you're rocking Soul Rift version, Soul Rift actually does that for you, but Army of the Dead does not. And I already explained earlier why Lucky Hit is so good, so because of our all minions attacking, and they also have a huge chance to attack twice, they will be proccing anything Lucky Hit related pretty much all the time. Monsters are going to be vulnerable all the time as well. For Tempers, we're going with Ultimate Cooldown Reduction and Skeleton Mage Damage. Alright guys, now that we went over skills and items, let's go over the Socketables that we're using. So, for the runes, on the 1 slot, we're going with a combination of Nagu and Zek. What this does is, as we maintain at least 1 active summon for 5 seconds, we gain offering for each up to 6 summons. Now, you will notice that we have 12 summons at all times. So if I press Army of the Dead, like so, every 5 seconds, watch what happens. Bam! This combination, this rune word shaves off 6 seconds of our cooldown every 5 seconds. It's a pretty powerful combination. It's going to ensure that we have a permanent uptime of our ultimate in combat, because then we get the benefits of Unyielding Commander. Second rune word is going to be Ahu Zan. So lucky hit up to 100% chance against non-healthy enemies. Once it does proc, our next attack will cause our hits to guarantee crit strike and overpower. We already crit strike all the time, thanks to the combination of Air of Perdition and everything else. However, this is going to allow our summons to overpower every once in a while. Now, overpower has been completely gutted compared to the previous season, so it's not nearly as powerful, which means that you can replace this if you want with something else, something more defensive if you struggle with that. However, it's still a 50% damage multiplier when it does proc, and because it's a lucky hit bonus, it procs very consistently. So this is something that I will personally recommend, but you can replace it if you want to. On chest, we're going with Intelligence Gems, and on the weapon, we're going with Emeralds for crit strike damage. Now let's talk about seasonal mechanics, powers, and gems. For Catalyst, we are going with Disintegrate. The choice of Catalyst doesn't matter too much, but I find Disintegrate just to be the best in terms of overall damage and utility, because as you can see, it has a cooldown of 5 seconds, but it does damage over 8 seconds, which means that we have 100% uptime on Disintegrate, so if we need our Catalyst to proc certain things, it's going to do that all the time. We're also binding our Catalyst on Reap, so that it's readily available for us at all times. Now there are 2 main choices of infusions that really matter. Number 1 is going to be Nebulous Extract, the Darkness Infusion. This allows our Catalyst to deal shadow damage, but more importantly, enemies hit deal 10% reduced damage. So if you're struggling a little bit with defenses, then you can use something to increase your damage reduction. And second most relevant one is going to be Smoldering Ember, because it deactivates monster Chilling Wind effects. Chilling Wind is kind of like that wind barrier that slows down projectiles, and our mages attack with projectiles. So trust me, you want to deactivate Chilling Wind if you can. So this is a preferable infusion, but you can swap it out to the Darkness Infusion if you struggle a little bit defensively. For Arcana, you have a couple of choices. This is something that I found works the best for me. However, Tranquil Stone invokes Unstoppable for 5 seconds. This is the only source of Unstoppable we have on this setup, so it's actually really valuable for us. Unfortunately, if we are already crowd controlled, we can't use this to get away with it, unlike, for example, the Mist or something like that. But if it's already on, we can't get frozen, feared, etc. So it's really nice to have. For second one, we're going with Fractured Core. Believe me, you want this. Our Catalyst is going to deactivate monster damage resistance auras. So those purple guys in the pit that provide damage reduction to all mobs around them, this deactivates that effect for 8 seconds. And our Catalyst has a cooldown of 5, which means this is pretty much always on. You can always do it. One thing this build struggles with is targeting. You cannot directly target a monster because your minions are the ones doing damage, and they do so randomly. They will prioritize enemies around you in a kind of a radius. However, this is not always an exact science, so they tend to attack randomly, which means that you cannot really directly target these monsters that have the damage resistance bonus, so this just deactivates that, which makes the pit clears a lot less stressful. And for the third one, we went with Bottled Wind. Evoking the Catalyst grants us additional barrier. In combination with our passive, this means that we get a lot more barrier and just allows us to be more tanky, because we're up there close and personal with monsters, always using Reap, always being in the melee range. We really want as much barrier as we can get. Now let's talk about the gems. For the first gem, I went with the newly reworked physical damage gem, because our mages deal part shadow damage and part physical thanks to the Ring of Mandel. This is another huge source of damage multiplication for us. For second gem, I think it's called Echo from Below or something like that. We gain 6% primary score stat, 6% max life, and Unhindered. This is just great. Unhindered is especially useful for us because we cannot get blocked by monsters, which allows us to move freely around the battlefield and pick up blood orbs for more damage. This is just great. And he also spawns these Jewel Guardians in the pit and other activities, which means that if you kill them, you also get a little bit extra progress as well, which is a nice little bonus. Also, funnily enough, these Jewel Guardians used to spawn in Trading Grounds where we are right now, but they patched that out before Season 9. That was actually quite funny to see. And third gem allows us to empower our summons, which our mages are, and they grow even larger in size and deal 50% more damage for 4 seconds every time we injure or kill an enemy, which is going to happen pretty much all the time. Alright guys, let's talk about Paragon board. Now, as always, you will have all the Paragon board in the planner. This is kind of the barest minimum, which you can already unlock at Paragon around 180, as long as you have all the reputation bonuses in all the areas in the game. And as always, I'm not going to comment on every single node, that would take way too long. The most important thing is always making sure that you unlock all of the legendary nodes and you unlock both bonuses of all 5 glyphs. Anything other than that is just a bonus, so you can pick up any other extra life or resist node along the way if you so choose. By the way, the planner also does have a little bit of these extra nodes that are not necessary, so you can kind of get away with unlocking the bare minimum of the build even earlier, maybe 170 Paragon, something like that, which is achievable, I feel, for everybody playing the season. So just get straight to it. We're starting off with Essence because it gives us a ton of crit strike damage, and also if you have extra points to spare, you can grab extra dexterity along here to further increase your crit strike damage. Our second Paragon node is going to be Cult Leader. So this is part of the reason why attack speed bonuses are so great on this build, because they are also a direct damage multiplier for our minions. Not to mention that our minions, if they attack quickly. They also proc like a hit chance faster and allow us more cooldown reduction. So just overall a great stat to have, and Cult Reader is going to be our node number 2. And also this is what I'm talking about. Like for example, you don't have to pick this at all. Your minions are very tanky, but you can. If you have extra points to spare, you can go here for extra armor and life for your summons, but it's not necessary. Our glyph number 2 is going to be Dead Razor. Dead Razor allows our summons to have extra damage. This is just another source of damage multiplication, but also Paragon nodes within range of this glyph gain a bonus to their minion damage and damage reduction. That's why we're putting it on this board, because here we have Overlord and we have Custody. This glyph kind of multiplies all of these bonuses around this area. For example, if I were to take one Paragon point from here and I would put it here on damage reduction, it's no longer 4, it's 8.4. So it more than doubles it. So just something to keep in mind. That's why Dead Razor is here on the second Paragon board. Moving on to Paragon board number 3, which is Frailty. This is just another source of damage multiplication. Our cursed enemies take more damage and they will be cursed all the time thanks to our pants. Glyph number 3 is going to be Eliminator. This is just another great source of damage multiplication. Paragon board number 4 is Flesh Eater. Once we consume 3 corpses, we gain 40% increased multiplicative damage for 6 seconds. This is part of the reason why we want to spam Raise Dead all the time. Glyph number 4 is Amplify, so another source of extra damage on our cursed enemies. And for glyph number 5, we're going with Exploit. We deal more damage to vulnerable enemies. And thanks to the affix on our ring, we're making our enemies vulnerable all the time. Final legendary node is Blood Begets Blood. This is a huge source of damage multiplication. Blood orbs grant 10% increased damage up to 50%. That's why in the gameplay I will show you, I try to go around and pick up as much blood orbs as I can. And corpse tendrils are the only source of blood orbs that we have on the build. And now we're moving to the final portion of this build, which is gameplay. Gameplay is really not complex at all. First of all, you can see my mages attacking this dummy. I immediately gain tons of barrier just from the lucky hit bonus. But the gameplay is very simple. So I just go in and I reap. By reaping, I gain damage reduction. My minions are the backline and I am the front line. I'm also using Blight. On Blighted ground, enemies take 20% more damage. And you can see Blight lasts 6 seconds. So I only have to refresh the Blight once every 6 seconds. I don't have to cast it all the time. In the meantime, everything else that's on cooldown, I press. I spam Raise Skeleton because by consuming corpses, I gain huge bonuses, and this priest also empowers our Skeletal Mages as well. I cast Corpse Tendrils whenever I can. It pulls in mobs, it creates blood orbs, it provides tons of damage. I cast Bone Prison whenever I can, more cooldown reduction, vulnerable, and increased damage, and of course Army of the Dead whenever it's online, especially if I see I'm about to go to the elite pack, I pop it. Basically, if anything is off cooldown, you press it. Meanwhile, we are holding Reap all of the time, and we are casting Blight once every couple of seconds. Everything else can and should be spammed. And then we go around and we collect blood orbs. Now let me show you how this actually works in action. Alright guys, and finally I'm actually going to show you how this looks like in practice in my tier 85 push, for example, which I actually cleared very comfortably, you'll see. I like showing you like this because I can actually pause and I can show you all the buffs and things that ordinarily I would struggle to show you in a live run. I find that this works just a little bit better. First of all, I'm sorry about the visual clutter. In hindsight, I should have probably turned off the damage numbers, but it is what it is. As you can see, so I am the one going up close and personal and casting everything off cooldown. Now I want to show you when I actually use Army of the Dead. Look at this. Army of the Dead active. In the middle of the combat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Within 4 seconds, it's up again. Sometimes it's up before before it even expires. So it doesn't take more than a couple of seconds. Also, this rune word As you can see, the overpower rune word fills up very quickly, pretty much very consistently. And as you can see, I'm just casting everything off cooldown. I'm up here, close to personal, I'm reaping, I'm casting Blight once every couple of seconds, I'm trying to collect as much blood orbs as I can, anything else that's off cooldown, I press. And that's it. That's really the gameplay. I'm trying to keep myself out of harm's way, trying not to get frozen. But first of all, you can see that I also have a pretty big uptime on Unstoppable, thanks to our Arcana. As you can see on this icon right here, I almost always unstoppable. So this is actually pretty nice as well. I don't have to worry about getting frozen too much. There's this very small window where I'm not unstoppable. Most of the time I am. So as you can see, like, I'm just going, using Reap to gain more damage reduction, and I cast Army of the Dead. Look at this, look how fast I get it back up again. So within a couple of seconds, 2-3 seconds, bam, it's up. Casting Reap, casting Tendrils, I'm casting Raise Skeleton, everything that's off cooldown, I hit it. I'm reaping, I'm letting my mages do the rest. Here's some more gameplay. So you can see there's a lot of these blood orbs that I'm trying to pick up. And I do an okay job at it. I definitely could do a better job, you know, just trying to run around and cast everything off cooldown, and I'm trying to collect as much of these blood orbs as I can, because we gain up to 50% extra damage if we do so. And that's pretty much it. That's the gameplay. Look how much time I have on Pit 85. I could probably comfortably clear Pit 90 as well. This is a very good boss killer, by the way. Single target damage is actually very good at this build, so you're not really going to have to worry about that too much. Look how much damage our mages do, and the gameplay is the same. Now, our uptime on Army of the Dead is a little bit lower on single targets. It is what it is, you know, but it's still pretty good. It's still pretty good. I'm trying to cast Raise Dead as fast as I can to keep the uptime of the buffs. Try to cast Corpse Angels for blood orbs and everything else. He does end up killing me one time, actually, which is annoying, but that's it. That's basically the gameplay. I'm gonna kill him right here. And bam. He's gone. And there you have it, guys. That has been a complete guide to the Archmage Summon Necromancer for Season 9. By following along, you shouldn't really have any trouble setting this up, so I hope you enjoy and have fun with it. And as I already mentioned, there are a couple of moving parts in this build. There are some items that you kind of need to have to really unlock the full potential. But once you get there, you know, once your masterworking is on point, once your tempers are on point, then the build really starts becoming very powerful. And this is probably the best minion build Necromancer has ever had. In previous seasons, Golem was sometimes decent, you know, other summons were sometimes decent, but I really think this is the most fun and most powerful that any minion Necromancer build has ever been. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me, guys. If you like this kind of content, if you appreciate the time that it takes me to make these videos, you know, hit that like button, you know, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out tremendously. There's going to be even more build guides coming up very quickly for Druid and Sorcerer, to be more specific. So this is something that you also like to see, then just stay tuned because it's coming very quickly. Thank you for watching. I'm Fallen Messiah, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.